Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to Day 3 of Commander 2016 Previews. Now, so far, I've been very excited about this product. Always one of my favorite products every year. I'm really looking forward to trying out these decks and playing with some of these cards. It looks phenomenal. They're doing some new things, like the partner mechanic, very exciting stuff. Now, if you watch Monday and Tuesday's video, you're caught up. You kind of know all the cards we've seen so far. And on Monday, we went into a lot of detail about the new mechanics. If you aren't familiar with the new mechanics, you may want to check out the Monday video at least first, because today I'll kind of assume we're all on the same page when I talk about mechanics on the cards. Having said that, before we get started, just a quick reminder, if you check out the description below, you're going to see some links to our Amazon affiliate store. And if you make any purchases through those links, a small percentage will come back to help support the channel. I'll also put some direct links to Commander products, so you can go right to those if that's what you're interested in as well. Thank you to everyone who's already made purchases, and thank you for your consideration with those. And as always, thank you to the patrons on Patreon to help make these videos possible. Having said that, we got a whole bunch of cards to look at, so let's jump in and see what was previewed in the last 24 hours. First, we have Deep Glow Skate. This costs a blue and 4. It's a fish, 3/3, and when this enters the battlefield, double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. Okay, this effect is always exciting for me. This reminds me a little bit of Doubling Season. Now, here's the deal. I think Doubling Season may be one of my favorite cards, definitely to play in formats like Commander or even in some cubes. I think, though, unfortunately, the problem with that card right now is the price point is just a little too high to include in a product like this. Because if you put that card in, say, one or maybe even two of the decks, those decks would probably fly off the shelf, unfortunately, before the others. And I think Wizards is trying to prevent that from happening, which makes sense and is totally a good thing. Although, part of the reason the card is as high as it is because I don't think it's gotten enough reprints over the years. For example, we did see a reprint in Modern Masters, but we didn't see one in the second Modern Masters, right? So there are opportunities for this card to hopefully be reprinted again in the future. But having said that, what do we get instead? We get this card, which, okay, maybe isn't quite as good, but it actually is kind of fun, and it would actually work really well in conjunction, I think, with Doubling Season. So what's awesome about this card is the fact that when you play it, you get to double any kind of counters on any number of target permanents. So that includes things like +1/+1 counters, sure, but also includes things like -1/-1 counters if you really want to get tricky out there, because it's target permanent. So you could put a -1/-1 counter on one of your opponent's creatures, and then this comes into play. You could actually double that. So that works that way. Also, where this is really going to shine, of course, is going to be Planeswalkers, right? I mean, think about those cards with unusual counters on them, loyalty counters or charge counters, stuff like that. This affects those cards, so that's pretty awesome. And imagine playing this with maybe some flicker effects or something, right? And you get a couple activations off of it. This could be really big. And even if you're not doing anything really shady with it, and you're just using it to pump your +1/+1 counters, this is a huge effect there too, and you can really start building a huge army pretty quickly. So I assume this is going to be in the growth deck. It kind of feels like it fits there, right? Really fun card. I'm looking forward to playing with this one, just kind of comparing and contrasting how I feel about it compared to, say, Doubling Season. All right, next we have Fairy Artisans. 1 blue and 3, Fairy Artificer, 2/2 flying. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. Then exile all other tokens created with Fairy Artisans. So this is actually an interesting card. I mean, when you look at it, it could fit in either the artifact deck or the cast deck. Maybe it's in both of them. It's very possible. You get a 2/2 flyer for 4. Okay, that's fine. But every time an opponent plays a creature, you get a copy of that creature. But when you do, you get rid of the tokens made by this card for any other creature. So basically, you get a token that's the most recent creature that an opponent played. And that's intriguing, but you do have to remember it is based on what your opponents are doing. And for the most part, your opponents aren't going to let you just get anything crazy with this, right? If they have a creature that's got some great enters the battlefield effect, they're going to hold it back until something happens to this card, probably. They're not going to give you a huge advantage. Now, granted, in Commander, you do sometimes form some alliances, and some people may try to help each other out. And in that case, this card probably gets a little bit better. But for the most part, you do have to keep in mind that it is very random what's going to happen to to you, and the randomness is offset by the fact that your opponents ultimately are in control of what you're going to get. And if you have a great token, the next person's turn comes along, they could give you a 1/1 creature, right? If they wanted to. So there's an interesting give and take with this card. If nothing else, I think it's a very fun card. I would totally love to play a card like this because it's fun. It's just what Commander's all about. Don't know if it's really super powerful or anything like that, but it does seem like something I'd like to play. Next, we have Parting Thoughts. 1 black and 2, it's a sorcery. Destroy target creature. You draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the number of counters on that creature. So this is interesting. Just on its own, it's basically almost non-conditional removal. Get rid of a creature for 3, and a lot of the times that's all this card's going to be. But if the creature happens to have counters on it, you take a little bit of life loss, but you get to draw a whole bunch of cards, hopefully. So that could be really good. Now, if you really want to stack the deck in your favor to make sure this is going to convert into a card draw spell and not necessarily a removal spell, then of course you could play with a lot of creatures that are going to gain tokens. So you could always destroy one of your own creatures if you think that's more important than saving this for removal. But that kind of versatility makes this card kind of fun, and it only costs 3. And like I said, worst case scenario, it's just simply destroy a creature, and that's the end of it. It's still pretty economical. The next card actually comes to us from a direct spoiler from Wizards. However, the reason it looks the way it does is because the article that Wizards released this in was talking about Magic the Gathering Online, and this is basically the online version we're looking at. So, in case you're not aware, Conspiracy Take the Crown as well as Commander 2016 aren't going to be released in their normal form on Magic Online. Instead, what they do is they're going to put these cards into the treasure chests, and players are going to open them when they open their treasure chests. And that's why they have a different expansion symbol and stuff. So just wanted to explain that real quick before we go on. But the card itself, 1 red and 5. It's a Runehorn Hellkite. It's a dragon, 5/5 flyer, and you can pay a red and 5. Exile this from your graveyard, and each player discards his or her hand, then draw 7 cards. This is on its own in a vacuum, not super exciting. Basically, it's a symmetrical effect, which sometimes is fine, sometimes it could work against you. However, if you build your deck around effects like this, then you could garner advantage off a card like this. This isn't a card you're going to just toss into any given commander deck and be like, hey, this is a cool card, let me throw it in. This is going to be a card that you really kind of plan and kind of say, you know what? I want to benefit more than my opponents when I play this effect, so how do I make that happen? And you can do that with things like maybe cheap spells they could play in conjunction with each other, or reanimation because you are dumping cards into the graveyard with a spell, stuff like that. Having said that, this will probably be part of the Chaos deck, I would assume. It feels very chaotic, and as long as there's some support cards in that deck that make this card better for you than your opponents, then it will probably be pretty good in that situation. So it's a very situational card. In the end of the day, it's still a 5/5 flyer too, so that's not a horrible thing at any time, I guess. Next we have Stonehoof Chieftain, and this costs a green and 7. Centaur Warrior, 8/8, has Trample and Indestructible. Whenever another creature you control attacks, it gains Trample and Indestructible until end of turn. So you're paying 8 for this, which, okay, is a little on the higher side. However, in Commander, it's not a huge deal. Pretty easy to do, especially if you're in green. And you're getting yourself an 8/8 Trample Indestructible creature, so that's actually pretty awesome. But even beyond that, now whenever your other creatures attack, they get Trample and Indestructible for that attack. Okay, that's kind of awesome. The one thing I would say about this card, though, is this is a card that's a little more skill intensive than perhaps it looks. If you play this card too early, you might be in an awkward spot where you could attack someone for lethal, but it's going to open you up for a counter attack, and you'll have to kind of balance how many of your creatures can attack in and what your defense looks like and so on and so forth. Because keep in mind, your other creatures won't be indestructible unless they're attacking, so you do have to remember that. There's also other ways to get rid of this, even though it is indestructible. I mean, there's a lot of exile effects out there, and if you put this card out too early and you kind of have to sit on it, then it's awkward because eventually somebody's going to hit it with an Oblivion Ring type effect, right, and get rid of it and take the threat off the board. This is a card you almost want to hang on to until later in the game when you're down to the last 1 or 2 opponents, and you can actually put this down and think about going in for lethal. Obviously, this gets better if you have big creatures, so in a deck like the Growth deck, which is, I'm assuming, will probably one of the places we'll see this card, it will be very good, right? But if you have a whole bunch of small creatures, not as good. So just just something to think about with this card, but I do think it's very strong and actually seems like it could be a lot of fun to play in the right deck. Next, we have a card that comes to us from a German language spoiler, and it's a Kyrie Rope Thrower. Costs a red and a white, legendary creature, core soldier ally, so keep that in mind for those ally decks. First strike and vigilance. A Kyrie Rope Thrower has +1/+0 for each artifact you control, and this has partner 0/3. Like I said at the top of the show, we talked more about partner on Monday, so I won't go into all the details, but it's relatively self-explanatory for the most part. This obviously will be in the artifact deck, and this is phenomenal in an artifact deck. This is one of the more powerful partners that I think we've seen so far. We've seen a couple good ones, but this one for 2 mana, getting to the point where you hopefully can have a decent sized power, but more importantly, you have first strike and vigilance on top of it. This thing is just a beater, but it can also defend you as well. And whenever you have a 2 casting cost creature with this much upside, I mean, those are always a recipe for great cards. And this is no exception. Being able to play this on turn 2, even if you only have 1 or even 2 artifacts out at that point, is still pretty good. And it's just going to get better as the game goes on. And if it dies, okay, maybe you can bring it back on turn 4 and it's going to be even bigger and better. This will definitely be a target, especially if you're able to complement it with a lot of artifacts. This can get pretty out of hand pretty quick. In a lot of ways, it's going to feel like a free attack sometimes because it does have vigilance, it doesn't tap, it has first strike, so even if your opponent throws something in front of it, they're going to have a really hard time killing it in combat. They're going to have to use a removal spell on it, and the fact that this can be your commander means it can keep coming back. And I like the fact that it's checking artifacts on the battlefield. It's not like getting a counter whenever you play an artifact, so when it comes back, it instantly goes back to where it was. Phenomenal card. Next we have Aishe Ojutai Dragonspeaker. Cost a blue, a white, and 2. Legendary creature bird monk, 1/1, flying. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature and as partner. So first off, it is a bird. There are some bird tribal out there, so you do want to pay attention to that. This looks like it's going to be in the growth deck, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. I think I saw that in today's article, actually. And completely makes sense there. Obviously, as opponents play spells, it's going to get bigger. The only thing that's a little bit awkward about this card is it doesn't defend itself really well. So you're paying 4 for a 1/1, which is a little awkward, but you do keep in mind that if your opponent tries to use removal on it, when they cast the removal, it is going to get a +1/+1 counter. So you could play this, your opponent wouldn't be able to get rid of it with something that deals 1 damage, because when they cast that, then it would become a +2/+2, right? So if it just hit the board, they'd have to use something like a shock right out of the gate. So keep that in mind. It makes it a little bit better. But what bothers me about it is I feel like it needed hexproof. If it had hexproof, then I would feel like, okay, there's still ways to get rid of it, but at least it's protecting my investment of 4 mana the first time I play it better than it is right now. And then you got to think when it dies and you want to play it again, now you're looking at 6 mana and then 8 and so on. It starts to become very expensive for a 1/1 creature, and you just have to wait and kind of put in your time before it becomes something much more than that. And let's face it, your opponents are going to still play their game, but they're not going to forget that this is out there. Somebody's going to hold some sort of removal spell for it, and I just feel like you're going to be spinning your wheels with this one more than anything. So I don't know, I'm a little disappointed in this partner compared to some of the others we've seen. But again, where this card could really shine is situations where you're able to proliferate or add more counters through other sources. If you can get this thing to grow faster and then it becomes more efficient, well, that's a little bit different. And that's probably what it's going to do in the growth deck anyway, right? So I still think this could be a good card in that deck, but again, not a card you're just going to arbitrarily throw into any commander deck that's running Azorius colors. Next, we have one of our 4-color commanders, and it's Kynaios of Tiro and Meletis. That's a mouthful. Hopefully I was at least close with that pronunciation. But anyway, legendary creature, human soldier, 2/8. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card. Each player may put a land card from his or her hand onto the battlefield. Then each opponent who didn't draws a card. Okay, so when I first read this one, I'll be honest with you, I was kind of like, meh, okay, I'm paying 4 mana, all different colors for a 2/8, and my opponent's getting benefits out of it too. But then I started thinking about it a little more, and I started kind of picturing it in a game, I guess. And I started thinking to myself, okay, here's what I like about this card. First off, it comes into the battlefield. It's a 2/8. It's going to be kind of hard to get rid of, considering it has a lot of toughness. This isn't a card you're trying to rumble with. It's really meant to kind of sit there and bide your time. And every time my turn ends, I get to draw a card, and as long as I have a land available, I get to play a free land. My opponents get to do basically one or the other. They get to either play the land or draw the card. So I'm getting double the advantage than each of my opponents are getting. Now, that type of attrition is a lot of times better in a single player game than it is in a multiplayer game, because even though you're beating one player out, if you look at every player individually, you're getting more out of it than they're getting. But collectively, the whole table is getting more than you're getting, if that makes sense. But even though that's the fact, I still think over time, if this card survives long enough, that small incremental advantage will start to snowball and add up for you, but it's just going to take some time. And what's kind of nice is opponents probably won't make this a priority, because first off, the ability seems a little innocuous to a lot of players, and secondly, they're also getting some advantage out of it, so they might be cool with it hanging around for a little while. And by the time they realize that you garnered a larger advantage than everybody else at the table, it may be too late. You may have too many answers in your hand and too much mana to play those answers with. So the more I thought about this card, the more I really liked it. And now this card is one I really want to try out. I want to see just how good it is. I think in the late game, this card is going to be really good. I think in the early game, the jury's still out for me. Is the card going to give too much advantage to my opponents as well as giving myself some advantage, and will it be enough for it to be worth playing, I guess is the question. I do think it's good, though. I think it's going to be a really good card. I want to try it out and just kind of see how it plays. Next we have Ludwig, Necro Alchemist, a red, a blue, and 1 legendary creature, human wizard, 1/4. At the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you lost life this turn, and this is a partner. Okay, this is a very interesting card. This can be actually really, really good, or in some cases, I think really, really bad, depending on the deck it's in. Here's my thoughts. First off, you put this card down, and this can be phenomenal for you as long as you have a consistent way of dealing damage on your turn to an opponent. Now, your opponents kind of get the same advantage, however, they can't attack you or do damage to you to get the benefit. So it's really giving them the incentive to attack each other. Again, another card that's giving people the incentive to create action. And I think that's a good thing. We saw that a lot in Conspiracy Take the Crown. We're seeing that in here as well. So one interesting thing, though, the way this card's worded. I play this card, I pass the turn to my opponent. Now my opponent's got a couple options to get this card draw. They could attack someone other than me. They could simply say, you know what, I'm going to attack this person with this 2/2 flyer just so I can get the card draw. Hey, no harm, no foul, I just want to get the card draw. I'm only attacking you for 2. They get that draw. Another way they can go about it is they could damage themselves. They could play a card that's like, take 2 damage, draw 2 cards, one of those style cards, and that works. A player other than you, being the caster, lost life that turn, and they are now able to draw the extra card. You don't have that opportunity. You can't damage yourself to get the ability. You have to damage somebody else. So as cool as it is that opponents are going to be damaging each other or maybe even themselves to get the card draw, if you do not have a way to consistently deal damage to somebody on your turn other than you, you're going to be in for a bad time with this card. So it's cool that they're kind of smiling and laughing and hitting each other and drawing cards, but if you can't do the same and keep up with that card draw, you're going to be falling behind in a big way, even though they are taking damage and you might not be. Just eventually the card advantage is going to catch up and you're going to start falling behind pretty severely. So having said that, when is this card good? It's good as long as you're pretty confident that the deck is going to be able to support you doing damage. Now, is it colors? So throwing in like lightning bolt style cards would be good in a deck like that, because if I can't get across with, say, a creature, maybe I can just bolt somebody and get the card draw for the turn, and that will be good enough until next time I'll have to figure out a plan again, right? So as long as the deck supports that type of gameplay, this is actually a really good card. If the deck doesn't support that type of gameplay, this is not something you want to run. So it's going to be very interesting to see the deck list that includes this card, to kind of see how they support it and make sure you're able to get the right advantage out of it, because this is a very delicate card and it's a very high skill intensive card, I think. And this is not a card you just want to toss into your random is it deck that you have at home, right? You're going to really want to think about the type of deck this goes into. But I think it's a very fun card. I like cards like this. They really do make you think about when they're going to be good and when they're not going to be good for you. Next we have Rabo's Soul Tender. This one costs a black, a white, and 3. Legendary creature, human cleric. 2/2 flyer. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And this has partner. Now this is a little more expensive than some of the other partners that we've seen recently, but this one is also having a bigger effect on the board state right out of the gate. So that's the give and take. Yes, you're paying a little more for this, but you're getting a pretty big impact on the board. Downside being you can't play it as early or as often as some of these 2 or 3 casting cost partners, but at the same time, you're just getting a stronger effect when you do get to play it. So I actually like the balance here. I think this is a really, really good card, actually. Okay, it's a 2/2 flyer for 5. On paper, that doesn't sound fantastic, but all your other creatures getting the Anthem effect can be a pretty big deal. And the fact that if your opponent doesn't have a way to deal with this or else deal with your graveyard, that is almost like drawing an extra card every turn by being able to go into your graveyard and taking your creature and putting it back in your hand. That becomes a big deal after a while, especially if this is out there for a number of turns and you have a pretty stocked graveyard. So again, I like this one a lot. I think this can do some serious work in a lot of different style decks. Next we have Conquerors File. This one costs 2. Artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each color among permanents you control. As long as Conquerors File is attached to a creature, your opponent can't cast spells during your turn, and it costs 2 to equip. This is actually really good in multicolor decks, and of course these being 4-color decks, I think this is going to be quite strong. I mean, paying 2 for this and 2 to equip is very, very reasonable, and even if you only have at any given time maybe 3 colors of your 4 out on the battlefield, it's still pretty good. Giving something +3/+3 for just 2 to cast and 2 to equip is very nice. I wouldn't be sad to play this in probably a 3-color deck even. Obviously this would be even better in a 5-color commander deck. So I really like the benefit you get here. Now, the other ability is just kind of another side ability tacked onto it and helps protect you, especially from counter magic and stuff like that, on your turn. That's actually a pretty nice benefit considering how cheap this card is. So again, you're paying 2 for a lot on this card. And again, whenever you see 2 drops with so much upside like this, you know they're going to be pretty good cards. So this one, it's hard to say how many of the 5 decks this will show up in. This could show up in all 5 of them, perhaps. But I think this is going to be a very good card in multicolor commander decks. All right, let's look at some reprints, and we have Chain of Vapor. This was originally printed in Onslaught, and I don't think it ever saw a reprint, but basically the idea of this card was, I think it was sort of a blue version of Chain Lightning. It costs a blue, it's an instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, then that permanent's controller may sacrifice a land. If the player does, he or she may copy this spell and may choose a new target for that copy. So late in the game of Commander, when you got a lot of players with extra land to burn, if you play this thing could really bounce around quite a bit and really just change the whole board state. This could actually be pretty interesting. And this is just kind of a fun Commander card. Again, price point, if you wanted an Onslaught version, it wasn't super expensive. I think it was only probably $1 or $2 or something like that to get a Chain of Vapor. But it's still a pretty fun inclusion. I think it will be just a fun card to play with, if nothing else. I assume this will be in the Chaos deck because it does feel like a very chaotic card. All right, our last card of the day is another reprint. This came to us from a Japanese language spoiler. It's Murmuring Bosk. It's a land forest, so of course you can tap it to add green mana to your mana pool, but also this will enter the battlefield tapped unless you reveal a Tree Folk card from your hand, and then you can also tap it to add white or black to your mana pool, but if you do that, it deals 1 damage to you. This is a very unique card. This is not a land cycle. This was kind of a one-off from Morningtide. It did see a reprint in a From the Vault because it was just so unique. If you want to get a Morningtide version of this, it's not super expensive. I think these things are around like $2 or $3. They're not really hard to pick up. But again, very good inclusion because we know we need to fix our mana, and this is basically a tricolor land. I can tap it for green. Wonderful. Or I can take a point of damage to get white or black out of it. So really 3 colors from one land is really good and is actually very useful in these style decks. What's really interesting about this card, though, is the fact that it does not come into play tapped if you reveal a Tree Folk from your hand. Makes me wonder if we're going to see some Tree Folk in one of these decks. And, of course, Doran is a very, very popular EDH deck, commander deck, and a lot of folks are maybe hoping that maybe there'll be a reprint of that card that shows up. I don't know if that card will be there or not, but I assume we're going to see some Tree Folk, right? Because this would feel really out of place if you included this in a deck and it didn't have Tree Folk. It would feel strange to me. I mean, I guess they could do it, but it would feel a little bit weird. It does still serve the purpose of fixing the colors. Now, this is also probably one of the cards that was alluded to in an article on Monday on the Wizards website, where they talked about reprinting some rare dual lands. This is probably one of them, so it makes me think we're not going to see like cycles. We're probably just going to get random lands here and there. This one, of course, doesn't really have a cycle. It's just a standalone land. So it'd be interesting to see what other rare lands show up over the next couple days. But having said that, guess what? Those are all the cards for today. And spoiler season or spoiler week is starting to wind down a little bit. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode looking at all the cards that are spoiled within the next 24 hours or so, and then we'll be back on Friday and we'll start looking at the actual deck lists themselves and evaluating the cards, at least in the deck that they're in, and we'll do that over the next 5 days after that. So as always, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality content for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't yet had a chance to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.